So real quick for the Housing Rebel members, if you're already a member, I have some new news for you. But if you aren't familiar with us, we are a community built around the idea that real estate should focus and work best for the people going through the process and not the industry around it, which is not really how it works all the time. Our community brings together consumers and providers with ethical professionals who actually want the industry to do better. Uh, for those that are members, for a little new news, I'll be going to Harrisburg next month to help support Bill HB 2120, which is going to make home equity investment companies fall under the usury law, which they do not want to happen. So I'll let you know how that goes. We also put our name behind some support in Colorado that would let the state go after real estate agents for restitution, just as they already do for lenders. Somehow real estate agents were not lumped into that originally. So we worked on that. And we also, for Colorado, put our name behind a new consent in which real estate agents would have to get informed consent from their clients before sharing information with their brokers. And that's partially due to the rise of pocket listings and the potential danger of having chatter around the water cooler and sharing your client's information when you might not even realize what you're doing is wrong. So on that note, I'm going to put for our first speaker today for Michelle Sarah. They have done so many amazing reports in the past, I would say the past 2 years. I know we had the UWM report. I know you weren't a part of that, but it is still one of my favorites. But for the reports that you have done recently on new construction, I'm going to throw them all into the chat so anyone is able to go in and access them at any time. But Michelle, if you want to go through and just give a little bit of information about yourself, that would be super great.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle. I'm an investigative reporter for Hunterbrook Media. If you haven't heard of us, we got started up just a couple years ago. We focus on all sorts of corporate wrongdoings, but one of our big buckets is housing and real estate. So we've done a ton of stories relevant to that. And you'll see in the chat the main ones that I particularly worked on were home builders D.R. Horton, Lennar, and LGI. So yeah, excited to talk to you guys about all that.
Yeah. So just for those who haven't, the three reports specifically, the D.R. Horton one, there was a lot of conversation about speed over the quality construction culture, trapping buyers into one-sided contracts, warranties deciding that are designed to run out the clock, forced arbitration. LGI was a fascinating one because they have the 4 times the foreclosure rate of FHA loans, a
Hmm.
ton of bait and switch pricing, targeting the most vulnerable consumers. What else? Some pretty rough examples of the disabled veteran who basically said they knew they were selling me a house I couldn't afford. And then you got one step further and found the LGI leaked sales manual that had unlicensed mortgage work, predatory credit repair, fake urgencies with fake sold signs, and a ton of more interesting stuff. So, how did you end up even finding these things?
Yeah, I mean, so we're pretty like data forward investigative organization. So I would say we kind of let that guide us first, like with this foreclosure rate analysis, just kind of looked into see like which organizations, which builders tend to be worse than others. Also, a lot of it is just talking directly to homeowners. So a lot of what I do is like interviewing and outreach to people. And so I'll go on Facebook, Better Business Bureau, various social media platforms, and just hear directly from homeowners about their experiences, and then use that to sort of guide our analysis and what we end up digging into as well.
I'm guessing you found the DR Horton Facebook group.
Oh yeah, there are a ton.
Yeah, there's one for Lennar. It's got like 44,000 subscribers. DR Horton
Yeah.
has one. And it makes me sad to look at it because there's so many people that are stuck, right? And they spend all this money to close on their new home. And now
Mhm.
something is majorly wrong and they can't get it fixed. And they're kind of stuck in a position where they don't maybe have the money to put
Yeah.
forth. The warranty should cover it, but then the warranty just drags on and on and on, right? They're given an excuse or a rejection, which we
Right.
actually personally have gone through years ago. And it was It's like if you can't complain every day and call them every day, best of luck to you because it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
So let's go through the questions because I kind of like to get right to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one that was submitted was what were the most common defects you found when interviewing these past new construction buyers?
Yeah, so the biggest one homeowners spoke to us about were water related, like mold, basically, and also structural. So water intrusion around doors and windows, foundation and grading problems, ventilation issues. I think mold is the one that sticks out to me the most. That is typically a result of like HVAC issues or roof issues, and it's all related, right? Fireproofing issues, inadequate insulation. Those are a lot of ones that stand out to me.
Do you think the mold is more southern states or is it just all over the US?
So, we talked to homeowners across the whole country. I think we initially thought that it might be more of an issue in southern states, but then quickly found out, no, this is actually going on across the country. But yeah, it's a good question.
The next one is what do you think is the biggest cause of the rise in these defective homes?
I think it's just this speed and volume business model. So we've done a lot of like reading of investor reports and like public statements by executives. They're talking about like value engineering, which ends up just being cost cutting on homes. And so there's this like system that kind of rewards using the cheapest materials. And also, minimal inspections, minimal oversight. I think particularly after the pandemic, I think we saw a lot of these companies start to try and speed things up and use cheaper and cheaper materials. It's just, yeah, just to cut their costs. And so it wasn't surprising to us that a lot of these defects and issues that we started seeing really rose pretty sharply after the pandemic. But yeah, at the end of the day, it seems to be about their margins.
Yeah. What about the decline in tradesmanship or the fact of even like getting people to join the trades?
Right. Yeah, that's something that we talk to homeowners as well. And another related issue is that these tradespeople that are hired are often affiliated with the builder themselves. And so there's not necessarily an incentive to actually fix issues or to really focus on these quality concerns when they're affiliated with builders themselves. So we found that to be an issue as well.
Right. What buyer story was the most shocking to you in regards to neglect from the builders, either pre or post closing? I have mine, but go ahead.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and there's so many that stand out to me, which is really sad. But one that really has stuck with me was a couple in Arizona. The man was a disabled veteran. The woman at the time was pregnant with their fourth child. They were looking for a home with another bedroom to, fit their family. They came across a D.R. Horton community up front. It looked like the perfect home for them. They were really excited about it. Um, it ended up, as she described it, being a really quick process. It's like see the home, use their affiliated lender, get in the home, and like then they just kind of disappear, is how she described it. Weirdness began about like 6 to 8 months in when they started getting sick. They weren't really sure why they were getting sick. Um, they yeah, just it seemed to be with like kind of flu symptoms. At one point, her husband actually got into a really bad truck accident driving his truck home. And then for her, because she was pregnant, she was really concerned about these health issues. Again, they didn't really know what was going on. She ended up having to go to the hospital early to have her baby. They had to do a blood transfusion. She almost died in the hospital. It was a really terrible birthing process. And yeah, she talked about almost losing her life. And turns out their entire home had been infested with mold from like almost the beginning, basically. So the mold had crossed the blood-brain barrier in both of their systems. They ended up doing a test that showed that the mold in the walls actually matched the mold in their systems. Um, and as we know, mold can cause various health issues from respiratory issues, and cognitive issues as well. And so yeah, they ended up figuring out that it was the mold in the walls that were a result of a roof put on improperly, as well as some HVAC issues. They had let DR Horton know about these issues, and they kind of threw their hands up and were like, "There's nothing we can do about it." One point offered them like a modest sum of money that would not come even close to covering the costs of remediating the home. And so that one really stuck out to me because yeah, just the it's hard to imagine having so many kids in the house and almost losing your child. It's just it was a really scary experience for them and was pretty directly tied to the issues with the
Mm.
home.
I know the other person that was in your original House from Hell report was, um, I always know her by her username because we always chat via DMs on TikTok. I think it was Ashley who bought a home on
Mhm.
her own and had mold. And I think it's
Yeah.
been, was she about 2 years at this point that she has yet to have any sort of resolution, to my understanding, with her home. And
Right.
unfortunately, the value is deducted. You have a giant mold problem and you're stuck.
Yeah, and I think that happens with all sorts of defects. The value just goes down. The company does absolutely nothing about it. It's just a series of
Mhm.
issues, really.
Next one. How did you discover the LGI foreclosures? And then the follow up to that was, what practices were they using and how can I protect my clients against this?
Yeah, with LGI, we started with the sort of simple question, are LGI buyers actually keeping these homes? And so what we did was we analyzed the frequency of foreclosure related documents, so whether that's like notice of default, notice of sale. Um, we did it with a particular LGI subdivision first. We calculated the foreclosure rate within this subdivision and compared it to the county, and we were like, oh no, this is not good. So then we repeated this analysis actually nationwide, and that's where we came across that figure you were talking about with FHA borrowers, as in, yeah, 4 times higher than FHA borrowers. Um, so that's how we discovered this foreclosure issue again, just looking at the data. Practices that they use to kind of push people beyond their means or I mean all over the place. I think the first thing is upfront in like the sales and marketing process, right? So they are knowingly marketing towards lower income groups of people, towards renters. We actually found that they would lure people who thought they were going into an LGI office thinking that they would be renting and tried to convince them to buy.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Anyway, um, we also, yeah, also various other ways to kind of bring in people that were lower income. And then once they're actually in the office, and this is again from the manual as well as from conversations with former sales reps, it was a very, very high pressure environment where they were instructed to literally lie to potential homeowners in various ways. They were also instructed to act as loan originators, even though they were not licensed to do that sort of activity, where they would take all sorts of financial information that again, not they're not licensed to take and discuss with these homeowners, and basically come out like spit out a number to them. They're like, "You can afford this. Isn't this so great? Let's go to your brand new home today," kind of thing. And we just read all sorts of psychological tactics that were used by sales agents to kind of convert a no into a yes. So they were trained at like every single no or every single hesitation, every concern, every stress that anyone might have. Like this is how you turn it into a yes, and this is how you get the sale done today. And when we actually ended up speaking with these homeowners, they describe a really pressure and stress-filled process where they didn't have enough information, they weren't given enough options or choices. They were told like sign today kind of thing. And often didn't feel like they had the knowledge and the representation information that they needed up front. So yeah, there's plenty more as well, but that's
One of them they had her convinced that she should get a grandfather to co-sign, or was it her father to co-sign on the loan or give her money?
right. Yeah, that was another thing. So if it turned out that a potential homeowner's credit was too low, they would try and have them reach out to anyone possible to get them to co-sign. In this person's case, it was their grandfather, but that was just one of the many tactics that they would use. Another one was driving people around neighborhoods and putting up like sold signs on homes that hadn't actually sold, just to
Mhm.
kind of create again the sense that like these homes are in demand, you better get one now kind of thing.
Yeah, it's hard. Even you see that sales pitching and the sales pressure.
Hmm.
Someone, even just in general in the real estate industry, sent me a flyer they got. I don't know if Page is on right now, but it was like a pitch contest. And it was
Hmm.
letting agents give their best response to why a buyer said they're not ready to buy a home, why a buyer said they don't want to buy a home right now. And I forget the other one. I think it was waiting for mortgage rates. And I was like, of all the things that you should be talking someone into, those things are very serious, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be who's the best at convincing you otherwise. And I think the industry has a lot of focus on coaching and pitching, whether it's new
Hmm.
construction or real estate in general. So it's not surprising, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
Next,
like there are sales tactics, but this was just, I mean,
yeah,
very creepy, very coercive, very predatory. It
right.
really stood out to me, their tactics specifically. Yeah.
And the next question, which I'm curious about, was there any recourse from Lennar, DR Horton, or LGI after your stories came out?
Um, I think some significant legal pressure. There were a lot of people who told us that they um actually entered into litigation with various home builders. Um, I think unfortunately in a lot of states there are arbitration clauses which make these cases kind of difficult. So they kind of get pushed out of court. And I think unfortunately, for the vast majority of these homeowners dealing with these issues, there has been no recourse. There has been no like positive ending for them, which is really tough and I think a product of a broken system rather than any
Right.
individual.
Was there any recourse towards Hunterbrook, or did they just kind of let you? I mean, you can't dispute facts and stories, I don't
Yeah, I
think.
mean, we have an extremely rigorous fact-checking process, so I don't know that there was anything they could have pointed out, but we have not heard from them. They never responded to any of our requests for comment, never
Mhm.
reached out to us after the stories were published. So, yeah.
One of the questions was, do you see a relationship between in-house lenders and higher closing costs or higher sale price than if they were to get a loan elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't have the data to support it, but what I do have is just anecdotes from homeowners that I spoke with talking to me about their rates and um prices, and it does seem that going with the affiliated or in-house lender does end up in significantly higher rates. I remember speaking with one woman last week who, had she had gone with another lender, her rate might have been more like 7 or 8%, whereas it was 12% with the affiliated lender.
Oh, wow.
And again, these are just stories from people and anecdotes, but I think probably points to a larger issue.
Yeah, I think it's in my opinion, their marketing, the last thing they want to do is lower the price of the home. So it's the
Hmm.
free basement remodel, it's the
Yeah.
rate buy down for the first 3 years, or 20,000 in closing costs, anything other than deducting the value, because then that offsets everything for the rest of the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question. What cautions would you give to buyers looking at new construction homes?
Yeah. I would say look out for arbitration clauses, number one. Look out for any discouraging of third-party inspections. A lot of the issues came when home builders have like their own affiliated inspectors go into these new builds, and obviously they're not going to find much if they're affiliated with the home builder. Any sort of pushy, uncomfortable sales tactics, I would say to look out for. Um, I mean, I think like using your gut, kind of like, does this feel coercive? Does this feel like I'm being pressured? Do I have all the information that I need? Taking your time. If it feels too fast-paced, it probably is. Um, and yeah, I think as much as you can, ensuring third party tradespeople, third party inspectors. If you're able to afford an attorney to look through your contract, that's also a great idea, I think. And yeah, I think new homes don't necessarily mean like everything is great quality. And I think that can get kind of
Mhm.
confused sometimes. Like people might assume if I'm moving into a new home, everything's going to be brand new and great. And actually, that is not the
Mhm.
case, as we know from these investigations.
Kirk just said in the comments too, agents in Lakewood, Florida, Sarasota are taking folks directly to models. They won't even show them existing homes. They're telling folks that they're all overpriced. And all the national players have active communities in this city. So the agents just need to be there on the initial tour to get credit for their commission. Kirk, you might want to meet Sam. He's up in a few minutes. But Sam is an attorney in Florida who is one of the very few who's actually, I don't know, Sam, if it's specifically licensed for new construction issues, or I guess we can go through that in a few minutes. But you two might want to connect. Last question. What other research are you doing in the housing industry? And is there anything anyone can help you with?
Yeah, so our current investigation is on manufactured housing. We're in pretty early stages on this, but we are starting to see some of the like similar lending practices and sales tactics that we were seeing with Lennar, D.R. Horton, et cetera, in this industry. So if anyone has any insight specifically on manufactured housing, or knows anyone that has, or knows homeowners, knows anyone in the industry, would love to chat with whoever, because I think this is kind of an understudied, underreported section of the market, and I think a really vulnerable one. So yeah,
Mhm.
I would love to
Absolutely.
hear from anybody about that.
Yeah, thank you. And then actually, Matthew, if you want to hop on real quick. So Matthew and Julie, I met Julie on TikTok. I think it's always on TikTok. I don't know why I always meet everybody on there. But Julie and Matthew, I think for your own home, correct, found an issue with something that ended up being apparently something that is consistently wrong, um, with many of the homes, and you've actually helped your neighbors discover this. So do you want to go ahead real quick and share what you
Yeah,
found?
certainly. And I apologize. Julie was planning to deliver this, if you will, today and to answer any questions. And she got caught up in a meeting. So I literally got called and said, "Can you be on this call for me?"
Yeah,
So I'm
happy to
trying to
have you.
step in like a good husband might do. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, we did purchase a D.R. Horton home, new construction. It's in Southeast Florida. And over time, we began noticing several different construction defects, as the industry would call it, and began noticing some serious structural issues, such as cracking floors and windows, stucco delamination, cracked windows, truss fractures, roof leaks, and water intrusion, both through the roof and through like the stucco. And we realized that after a while that these weren't just isolated problems, but appeared to be a much deeper systemic problem, if you will. So and we did everything that Michelle had talked about. We went through the warranty process. We communicated a ton, both via phone and emails. And after a while, they just tend to ghost you. They just they no longer want to deal with you. So what we did is we decided to ask one critical question, that was the subsoil and foundation prepared according to the building design, local Florida building codes, building permits, and ASTM testing standards, and federal guidelines like HUD handbook and or their data sheet 79G. So we started to say there's a bigger problem here. We needed to understand the root cause. And so to answer this question, we did begin requesting records ourselves and teaching other homeowners how to request and read their own public records. And through this process, we reviewed hundreds of documents. She would constantly ask me, what about this? What about that? Because I do have a background in engineering and science, if you will, and I would just try to explain that to her. And we mainly focused on requesting house design plans and in-place soil density test reports across Florida and additional states. So what we did find is that the in-place soil density testing is not optional. It's a required step in verifying that soil compaction meets the engineered design specification. And without that verification, there is no evidence that the foundation was built on properly compacted ground. And so if you want, we can examine some of the language of some house design plans, if you wanted to get into that.
Yeah, we have a few minutes, sure.
Okay, sure. I think those will be quick.
Yeah,
For example,
and I think it's
yep.
important to say too that Julie took this information to everybody and anybody, including all the way up to, at the time, I think Ben Carson, who's now sits on the board of directors of is it DR Horton, one of the two. So I mean, she has taken this information everywhere she can, and it's just no one's listening, which is really frustrating.
We've taken it, yeah, to your point though, we've taken it to our local municipality, we've taken it to the state, we've taken it to the state attorney general's office, we've taken it to Ben Carson, who was the former HUD. I can't remember, he was the former HUD president, if you will, and he now sits on the board of DR Horton, and we'll share why that relationship is important perhaps later on. And she's even gone to the president. She is a bulldog, if you will, and she's even gone to the president of the United States. So currently we're kind of waiting as we see things unfold on the national scale. So thank you for inviting us to today and to have such a conversation with this from a variety of industries, from homeowners to attorneys, to real estate, if you will. I think this is great. And our main focus currently is getting out this awareness and that it isn't just, if I were to, you had mentioned something earlier, and it was so many people feel stuck. And at the end of the day, I can provide some technical aspects of soil compaction, but there's so many, all the homeowners that we speak to out there, they just simply feel stuck. They can't afford to do all of the repairs that are needed. And and when you go to attorneys, if you will, and we've been to many of them, I'm not going to go in detail on that, but for the most part, the same story is it's going to cost you a lot of money in order to get any reimbursement, if you will, or compensation for your loss.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, it might be a good idea if you and Julie wouldn't mind maybe writing something, and we'd be happy to put it through, the website is just like an educational resource of what you should be looking for and why it matters. Sure. I think that would be great because I know I have no idea about a soil, not a clue of anything other than like what my home inspector told me, which is horrible to say, but like I would have no idea unless there was a problem that I even needed to look for that. So I think that's really important.
And that is part of the root cause because the home inspectors don't necessarily focus in on the foundation, if you will. So if you have that third-party inspection, they're focused on going through based on whatever the state requirement is, but they're not necessarily focused on, I shouldn't say foundation, but subsoil type conditions, right? So those things are covered up during construction, and as a result, they don't focus on it. So one thing I would add to what Michelle was saying earlier is there are, in the state of Florida, at least, builders and municipalities are allowed to use what's called a private provider, and it has to be a licensed engineer or architect, and it is legal to do that. But I also think that's part of a broken system, unfortunately, because now we have the private provider is getting paid by the builder, if you will.
I think your attorney general is looking into that, right? I think it was Florida was supposed to look into that situation.
I hope so. We've provided
Yeah.
them with the whole slew of evidence that we've developed by all means.
Mhm.
So I can't talk more about that,
Right,
but
right.
yes, it's certainly a big topic. And I mean, if you have an ethical private provider, there probably wouldn't be an issue. But the fact of the matter is, because they're getting paid, their compensation is coming directly from the builder and not the municipality that actually has the responsibility of compliance. So that's the main responsibility, is that make sure that the work is done in compliant with the permit conditions, which typically go back to the engineering design. So that was a good segue. Let me just talk about some of the things that we did discover here. For example, I'm going to use our home design plan, which is
Yeah.
like many other, because obviously this is D.R. Horton. They build a lot of the same homes, not only in throughout the state of Florida, but nationwide. And our home design plan under foundation site preparation states footing excavations and slab subgrade shall be compacted to a dry density of at least 98% of the modified Proctor maximum dry density determined in accordance with ASTM D1557. So most people, perhaps like yourself, don't understand what that means,
Mhm.
right? But it's really, it's kind of simple. Well, let me go to the next one. I'm just reading a few things here. Locations failing to meet the geotechnical engineer's requirements shall be recompacted and retested at the contractor's expense, when in this case the contractor was D.R. Horton, and as directed by the engineer. Written certification that a minimum design bearing capacity and that the compaction requirements have been met shall be made by the geotechnical engineer. So our design plans, as I just read, state that the soil compaction requirement specified by the engineer was 98%. Others that we've reviewed or looked at might be 95%. Okay. Those are two common soil compaction requirements that I've seen throughout our research, if you will. In Texas, another D.R. Horton home, if you will, the design states design specification, or unless specified otherwise in the soil report, all fill shall be compacted to 95% Proctor density according to FHA data sheet 79G. So that starts to identify some of the requirements that are out there. FHA, HUD, ASTM, and in every case, it's this recommendation for soil compaction comes from the structural and or geotechnical engineer, and it is memorialized within the design report itself, the engineered, a stamped engineered report, if you will.
Mhm.
So this soil compaction requirement is not arbitrary. My wife wanted me to let you know this. It's mandatory.
Mhm.
And I don't think a lot of homeowners understand that. This isn't like, this is thou shalt not, or thou shalt do, that you have to meet this. And so it is an engineered specification to ensure structural stability and compliance with international and state building code. Okay, so that's what these structural engineers are basing their opinion on. It's sometimes based on soil samples prior to construction, geotechnical analysis that's done in a lab, but ultimately they're making a recommendation or a specification. They're specifying a requirement for soil compaction.
Mhm.
HUD also has gotten in on this. This is kind of interesting. This is something we learned along the way. But HUD 79G states, after each layer has been placed, mixed, and spread evenly, it shall be thoroughly compacted to the specified density. The specified density will be stated as a percentage of the maximum density attainable using current ASTM standards, if you will. So let's see here. My wife gave me a few more other things to talk about, but let me talk about our overall findings, if you will. So what we
Yeah.
found is that in most cases and across several states, homeowners are not provided copies of soil density test reports upon request. And so they just simply don't exist, if you will, within the municipalities. So the question becomes, did D.R. Horton compact the site properly? Okay. If so, why is no in place testing to measure this required specification? So without having that data, it's really questionable whether or not soil compaction was done or done in accordance with at least the standards.
Mhm.
In
And real
our
quick,
case,
Amelia asked a question when you're talking
yeah.
about inspectors. Are you talking about county inspectors, the building
In the
inspector?
state of Florida, county inspectors or municipalities are have that role and responsibility to make sure that the work is of compliance, right? That the work is done in accordance, whatever the permit requirements are, state statutes, and whatever the laws of the land are, if you will. In the state of Florida, private providers are allowed to be hired by the builder. And I just based on my experience, and I'll give you an example. When our house was constructed, I asked for photographs of the home inspections.
Mhm.
They were able to provide 2 photographs. Both of the photographs were from the road of the house. Those were the only photographs even taken as part of the home inspection.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh gosh, we have like one more minute for this. Is there another important point you wanted to go over? And then, if it's okay, if I can share your email or Julie's with the group, or we can talk further about if you want to write a little more explanation to this, because a lot of this, I don't think anyone would even question, or even
Yeah.
for the agents on here, it's maybe an important thing moving forward to pay attention to.
Yeah. What I would say in our and neighboring developments, most soil density tests failed to meet the engineer's required soil density specification of 98%. And so in our case, we actually were able to get the test report, but yet they all failed, if you will. So in other developments, we've received HUD letters for foundation soil density exists for every home, but the homes did not meet the 98% design specification. Right. And so we're seeing all of this very suspicious activity that warrants further investigation. And quite frankly, if you look into it, particularly as part of discovery, you're likely going to find that soil compaction wasn't completed, or if it was completed, it wasn't tested. And if it was tested, at least for our reports, we noticed that they were missing critical information that's required as part of ASTM standards. That critical information ties back to prove that the work was actually that the testing was actually done. So, in conclusion, we observed a broader synthetic pattern affecting homeowners across multiple states. Many facing structural failures without access to test reports. Therefore, there is no technical evidence that proves soil compaction was conducted at all or in compliance with the mandated standards. I would say that it's a broken system. Michelle had mentioned that, and we do need accountability within this housing market. And I would say that builders, and I can only speak to D.R. Horton in this case because based on my experience, is required to construct homes that adhere to building codes. It is must. They must meet building codes, which set the minimum standards for safety, starting with a firm foundation. Municipalities must enforce compliance with these building code statutes and other regulations. Licensed engineers who serve as private providers or as inspectors must thoroughly inspect foundations and structural components to verify compliance with building codes and safety standards. And overall, this just represents a systematic failure of a broken system related to soil compaction. And a lot of the symptoms that Michelle spoke of earlier, we had many of those symptoms, if you will, and we realized that many of those symptoms are probably not all symptoms, but many symptoms can be related back to the sinking and settling of homes, and things start to adjust in the roofs, in the stucco, in the stucco exterior, in the floors. You start to get cracks and things of that nature, which begins to allow for this water intrusion at a much greater rate, which then connects to higher humidity within homes. And then when you connect that to any problems with the HVAC or ventilation, it's like a perfect storm for mold and or other health problems, right, within a
Right.
home. So
Well, thank you so much for you and Julie for doing this. And if anyone wants to connect with you, is it okay if I give them your information if they have more questions? And then we'll talk further. If you guys want to do maybe just an easier, like educational article, I'd be happy to share it and get it out there, because this is nothing I even would have considered or was told about, or honestly, the agent that helped us buy the new build probably was even aware of. So I think it's important. And on that note, we'll bring in the big guns, Mr. Sam, if you want to hop on real quick. So, Sam, do you want to share a little bit about yourself? Because you hopped onto our meeting. I asked you like super late, and I'm very gracious that you decided to join us. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Sam Korab. I'm an attorney in Florida. Specifically, I'm located in the Fort Lauderdale area, but I practice all over the state. I got my start as a lawyer defending mortgage foreclosures. I've also done some work challenging allegedly usurious lending practices in what are called merchant cash advance cases. And that was all before I transitioned to practicing construction law, which I've done in Miami for a few years, primarily doing general service, just representing contractors, trades, and suppliers in day-to-day construction, everything from negotiating contracts and scopes of services through disputes as a project progresses to defect claims at the end of a project and payment claims before ending up here at Morgan & Morgan, which some of you may be familiar with from the billboards and relentless TV and radio advertisements. What's little known is that we have a small business trial group that handles construction defect claims on behalf of building and home owners across the state of Florida. We are a much smaller group, even though we are part of Morgan & Morgan, and we don't really operate nationwide to the extent the personal injury practice does. But what we like to focus on are what we call community claims, which are when you have a group of homeowners in a new construction neighborhood all experiencing the same or similar issues. What we do is we investigate those claims. We hire various consultants, experts, engineers, contractors to give us a thorough understanding of what went wrong and how it doesn't comply with the building code or industry practices and standards. And we bring construction defect lawsuits or arbitrations against the builders in order to try and recover for the homeowners as much as we can for them to make the necessary repairs and either fix it up and get out of the home or make it the home that they thought they were buying in the first place. So that is our focus, and that's what we do. We generally, like I said, do these on a community or building-wide scale, just because of some of the costs involved can make it somewhat prohibitive to do on an individual basis. And, that is an unfortunate constraint that I am putting my thoughts into how to get around so that we can open up this practice to more homeowners and help more people with these issues. But for the time being, we're investigating on a community to community basis, and that's our main focus.
Thank you for doing that. I think you and I talked too, that's the hardest part is the cost and the getting everybody together to even be able to make a claim, and I'm sure to a degree that they bank on that, the cost of doing business, as some of these companies have. So I want to get to our questions because there were some good ones. I got this one from a lender. She's not on at the moment, but I know she's dying for your answer on this. For her specifically, her buyer built a home, and he's a disabled veteran. And before he closed, they got an inspection, and there was fungus all throughout the crawl space. They noted that the fungus had tried to be cleaned up. It was going to come back, and they suggested they have to make a ton of these changes. The buyer wants to walk, and they did. And then even though the builder let him go, the agent just invoiced him for a $10,000 commission fee. So she wants to know, as she's seeing more and more predatory behavior by builders, what resources do these professionals and buyers have when they get to that point, considering the cost, for this disabled veteran to hire an attorney to fight a $10,000 commission bill for a home that has fungus growing absolutely everywhere, like what's their option? Are there resources, or where can we direct people?
That is a great question. So resources, honestly, on a low cost basis are very hard to find. What I tell clients all the time, even those clients with the ability to pay, is the best approach to a dispute is to not get into a dispute to begin with. However, knowing your rights and knowing the law are a huge benefit in being able to talk back to some of these predatory practices. For instance, in the specific situation you just mentioned, you're well within your contractual rights to walk away from a home purchase contract if the inspection notes something that you are not comfortable with. In the standard form Florida residential as is sale contract, there is the inspection period and there is the right of the buyer to unilaterally terminate the contract based on that inspection. So in terms of avoiding that situation, you want to make sure that the inspection clause in any contract you're signing allows you to back out if you believe anything in the inspection is a problem. So you don't want it to say, if both parties have to agree that it's a problem or that the builder has to agree that it's a problem, just that you have the right to agree that it's a problem. The other issue to look at here is the parties involved, right? A lot of these new home builders, these big box builders that we're talking about here this entire time, have a lot of affiliated and in-house agents as sales representatives, as loan originators, as mortgage brokers, as inspection companies, as even insurers or insurance agents to sell you your homeowner's insurance for the home. So what's really important in terms of avoiding situations like this is to choose the people you work with. A lot of people can hopefully end run around some of these issues by talking to lenders first, talking to your bank, talking to your credit union, getting your approval letters and your mortgage quotes from lenders that you would rather work with, rather than relying on the builder's one-stop shop. Because I promise part of the reason they're able to offer all the incentives they offer is because they are doing it all in-house and they want you to close quickly and without issue. And that is not always to your benefit. Time may be more to your benefit. So I encourage anyone on the market, especially for a new home, to choose the people you work with and don't go for anything where everything is done in-house.
No, that's smart. I could see this is Doug's favorite topic. Doug and affiliated businesses. This is his, I don't know if everyone remembers Doug. He did our meetup a couple months ago, and he was the man behind the NAR lawsuit and has been fighting affiliated business agreements for probably longer than I have been around. Am I right, Doug?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am that old, and I have been
I
fighting
didn't mean
this
it that way,
that
Doug.
long.
Yeah.
But I spoke before Congress about these issues, and the in-house title companies are almost unavoidable. And I know that because I have boots on the ground. I like to see what's going on out there, and so I have a practice that allows me to represent consumers in these situations as well, and actually through the transaction. And what I have found is when we have used an independent title company that's not affiliated with a builder, that the builder often won't provide the master abstract. They'll require the closing to occur at their offices, which is nearly impossible for a buy-side closing in Minnesota because the buy-side is the one dispersing the transaction. So not having your staff or your office and having to close, they make it nearly impossible to use an independent title company. Plus, they are, in my opinion, in violation of RESPA in the way that they force people to use their in-house services because they call it a discount. If you use their in-house title and their in-house lender, they're going to provide a $20,000 or $15,000 discount on the house. It's really a penalty if you don't use them. So
when it's baked into the cost of the house,
Yeah, but it shouldn't be, right?
Oh yeah.
By setting it up that way, it's really a way to force for a seller builder to force a buyer to use their in-house title. A title company is supposed to examine title, investigate title, find and make decisions on insurability and closing issues.
Mhm.
The last person in the world you want making those decisions is a title company, a builder who has a $500,000 fee, riding on that deal closing. And so
Right.
things are often missed by the title company. They're often missed by their lenders. It's a rubber stamp process. And they're very biased, of course. So,
Right.
yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go too far deep on this because I know we could talk all day about it. The next question for Sam was, I think this was from Crystal. She's in Florida. Local builders cannot build at a margin that incentivizes it with taxes and insurance costs through the roof in Florida when they go up against the national competition. Are you seeing the same thing in other markets, Sam?
So I'm only familiar with the Florida market, but yes, that is generally, what I'm seeing. I'm seeing if you're at a higher level of purchase price, there are some custom home builders out there that, build in the mid to high six figures that, have a much better reputation and a much better ability to hold them accountable and a more greater willingness to work on the unique terms of your design in your purchase contract. Whereas when you are at the price point of, $500,000 or below, what are considered more accessible homes for the general public, first-time home buyers, low-income home buyers, your options are really limited for new construction. And that's where you see these big box builders that are going to do everything their way. They're going to use their boilerplate contracts. They're going to use their people. They're going to keep everything in-house because their goal is to roll these communities out and sell them out and move on to the next one. So yes, it is unfortunate, but I think especially as someone noted earlier with the cost increase that came from COVID, disrupting supply chains, impacting the labor markets, and just driving construction costs up across the board, you priced out a lot of small to medium-sized builders in that process where the finances just don't add up for them to build accessible homes.
Someone had a question. Can a group lawsuit be brought based on, sorry, we got a puppy and I made it to 2:55 without them getting into a fight about peanut butter. But can a group lawsuit be brought based on a specific failure to properly perform a construction practice rather than a community basis? So I think we're talking about multi-communities or statewide versus individual communities.
Right. So I was working on typing out a reply to that, but I think it's better if I just answer this verbally because, revisiting what I'm typing versus speaking about the next question. It's a great question. The answer is maybe. I only practice in the state of Florida. So if you're talking about bringing this nationwide, you're talking about essentially a class action. And where that becomes difficult is to have a class action lawsuit, you need to have what is phrased, an identity of claims, meaning everyone's claim must be more or less exactly the same. You see this more in like a product's liability where, I bought this stove and I hit off and it sets it to 700 degrees, right? And everybody who bought that stove has that issue. That's very clearly you all have the same claim. When it comes to soil compaction in real estate, it's much harder to say that you all have exactly the same issue because the law in Florida, at least, treats almost every piece of property as its own unique thing. No two houses are considered exactly the same. No two pieces of land are considered exactly the same. And that's pretty common throughout all of American law. And so it's very difficult to go nationwide and say it's the same issue and get class certification when you might be talking about clay soil in Texas versus sandy soil in Florida versus boggy soil in Louisiana versus limestone rock in, the Miami area versus, shale rock in the Appalachians. So it's very difficult to say you all have the exact same claim, right? Then the second part of this is damages. Generally speaking, American civil law, and specifically speaking, Florida law, you can sue somebody saying, hey, you didn't comply with this requirement. But the question the court is going to address is, what's the harm? Where are your damages? Okay, you're entitled to $1 because they technically didn't comply with the statute, but you haven't been harmed by their non-compliance. So that's where you get into the more specific issues that make much more sense on a community by community basis. Because if it's one neighborhood with the same soil and it wasn't compacted and you're starting to see structural issues, that's where it makes sense for that community to come together and bring a claim on a community basis. It's much easier to argue 10 houses all in a row that have the same underlying soil conditions and failure to properly compact it, much easier to make the claim that you all have the same issue. So a construction defect suit really should be addressing the root cause, right? You're not just suing saying my foundation is cracked, you owe me to repair it. You're saying my foundation is cracked because you didn't compact the soil, and now I have to consult with an engineer and a contractor to figure out how can I fix this and make my home up to the standard to which it should have been sold to me. And that should theoretically either address the problem or at least design a new fix that will negate the problem and have the builder pay that cost.
Right. I think Doug left you a message. Maybe you guys should connect at some point. I feel like you guys would get along really well. This is an important one because I see this on social media a lot. What can a buyer do when a builder declines them to have a third-party home inspection or refuses them access to the roof or crawl space during the inspection? Is that something that would be like upfront in the contract before you start building?
So your right to inspect is a contractual right. It's not something where Florida statutes say you have this right to access the property during a home inspection. The standard Florida residential as is sales contract is what provides the right to inspect the home and to walk away from the contract if the inspection isn't to your liking. So it is a contractual right, and you want to make sure you're reading that carefully, because if the contract says, we may or may not give you access to inspect, my advice would be walk away. If they're not willing to let you look at the house you're buying, then it's too large a purchase, too big a decision to just trust that it's okay. That's not a standard practice in home building in the country or in Florida, and their refusal, especially if they put that in writing, is something that you would need to get out of.
Got it. Yeah, that was something I noticed. I don't know if it was Arizona. Cy Porter does a ton of stuff on new construction. He was going to join us today, but he ended up having an inspection. So we'll have him come to a different one. But he's always getting pushback because you're not supposed to go on the roof, and he keeps fighting, saying you absolutely can. And I think it's important, especially if you're in an area in a climate where your roof is very important. You need to be up there. So I think those were all the questions I had. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon for, specifically for your state, or any other tips for home buyers considering new construction?
Sure. So, do your homework. As much as we would like to think that everyone is going to comply with the law and the requirements to protect consumers, protect home buyers, the law only works if somebody's enforcing it. And often when it's a civil matter, enforcement means somebody is suing somebody. And my best advice to any client I've ever represented is it's always better to avoid a lawsuit whenever possible. If you can avoid being in a situation that necessitates a lawsuit, great. So if you are looking at new home construction, make sure you are working with a lender you chose ahead of time, a real estate agent you chose ahead of time, and a home inspector you chose ahead of time. Another thing I would like to note for a lot of people is that, your standard residential home inspection is not going to cover every issue under the sun. And it's often not as thorough as we would like it to be. It may cost additional money, but you may often be able to avoid a lot of problems if you're paying someone to do a more thorough inspection, like scoping the plumbing during their inspection, doing an air quality test during the inspection, having them address more than just the standard inspection requirements is one way to protect yourself. You might spend a few $100s more on your inspection, but you might avoid closing on a home that's going to have significant defects. The other issues that I would remind people is and this was mentioned earlier, if it feels like it's moving too fast, don't be afraid to speak up. If you are concerned that it seems too good to be true, it probably is. No one should sell it to you as a take it or leave it process. You use our inspector, our sales agent, our lender, our insurer. We'll provide it all for you, no questions asked, one-stop shop. That should give you reason for concern. It's a major decision, and there are resources out there to help you through the process. Reach out to those resources, use those resources, ask questions.
Yeah, I think specifically to a pre-drywall inspection, I think absolutely makes a ton of sense. And a lot of times I think inspectors will package that together for you, with what they offer. So it's definitely important. Is there any other questions anyone had as we kind of wind down for everything? And again, if you're a member, this will all be in your dashboard so that you'll have access. You can refer back to this. And Sam, is it okay if I share your contact information too, if anyone has follow-up questions?
Yes, absolutely.
There's a few people here who are in your state and probably are coming across some super interesting things. Any resources by state for attorneys like Sam? God, I wish. I think I have two people. I actually have someone else right now that is looking for an attorney that just messaged me, and it's just hard to find for this specific category, I think. Do you have any specific tips? Or is there anyone else, Sam, similar to what you're kind of, I don't want to say if licensed in is the correct,
Sure. Yes. So most state bar associations handle certifications in sort of specialty areas. I don't know how common that is state to state, but reaching out to your state bar association for a referral list or a list of attorneys who specialize in specific issues, notably real estate, new construction, those sorts of things. Most state bar associations keep some sort of list like that and will be happy to provide you at least some preliminary information. Another thing to keep in mind when you're shopping for lawyers, if you are in a situation to shop for lawyers, is you may have to call 10, 20, 30 firms and talk to, a dozen plus attorneys before you find one who handles exactly what you're looking for or that you're comfortable working with. So know that it's a process and know that that's okay. You don't need to go with the first attorney you talk to. You don't need to go with the first one who says they'll take your case. Make sure your goals and their goals are aligned. Make sure your understanding and their understanding are aligned and that you're comfortable working together. So refer to your state bar association websites, I'd say would be your first step in that process.
Okay. And Amelia, I think you're in Virginia, right? There's a really great independent title company who is also an attorney. He actually just gave me a name for another attorney for someone else who had an issue. So I'll send that to you as well, just so you have it. He's a great guy. Any other questions from anybody? You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, thank you to Julie, Matthew, Sam, and Michelle for spending their time with us today and helping us educate everybody. Again, I'll put this will be a public meetup, so I'll put it on YouTube as well, just so everyone has access to it, can share it or reference back to it. But for members, it'll also be in your dashboard, so you can go back and watch it as many times as you like freely to your access. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And if you need to connect with anybody, just shoot me an email and I'll be sure to connect you.